Hello, hello, hello. Welcome. Welcome, everybody. Just get this lights, camera, action. Well, a little bit late today. Forgive me. It's been a very, very big week. I'll give everybody a few minutes to get here. Maybe a little bit of a type in a little welcome. Good day. So here we are. It is Palm Sunday, and here at Revolution, we don't celebrate a lot of holidays. I've been busy with art. You can see I like to make fun hats. This is my dream is to one day have hats made on Ship John, company Ship John. This is one of their hats that I made my own Grace hat out of. I think the Anarchy symbol went a little big, but oh well. What are you gonna do? But one day I would love to do a line of hats just off on the Ship John. They do really good trucker caps. I've got one that I've had for a couple of years and I love it. So if you haven't checked out Ship John, it's in a company out of Portland. I can't afford any of their clothes, but their hats, and I've got one of their wallets years ago, like 3 or 4 years ago, and I still have it, and it's still like perfect shape. So Ship John is a really cool company, so check it out. This is one of their hats. It had a little emblem on it. I took it off and then put the Grace is Anarchy symbol on there. Speaking of Grace is Anarchy, guess what, everybody? So I've been getting requests about my Grace is Anarchy hats. Not this one, but the one that I've had two that were Atlanta Braves hats that I turned into Grace is Anarchy. And people have been asking if we can do those hats. And so me and Brian and Teresa and Ray have been talking to different folks trying to figure it out. And a few weeks ago, I went to a show and I ran into a very old friend of mine. I've known him for 30 years. He was the drummer of Blenderhead, Matt. And he said, yeah, I'm doing some merch stuff. And I said, well, I keep getting requests to do this Grace's Anarchy hat. And he goes, well, he's like, I work with the company. Let me see what we can do. And he goes, hey, so I sent him the design that we had made like 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago, actually, that we never did anything with. Just because finances and all that stuff. But, we did get a really cool graphic designer to make it for us. And he goes, well, we can send you a sample and let us know what you think. So look at this, folks. Boom. There it is. There's the sample of the Grace is Anarchy hat. And so now, obviously, finances are really tough here at Revolution. But we did get a donation, someone who said they wanted to help it go towards these. So probably what we'll do is we'll probably do like for a donation type of thing, because we don't really want to sell stuff and get involved in sales tax and all that stuff. And so we'll probably do like a donation thing with the hat. And then we've got this sticker. I always get these little slap stickers made to pull over town, and I got a bunch of these. So we'll probably put that in there. And a couple other Revolution goodies, badges and stuff that I've had made over the years that we'll throw in and just be a fun little Revolution pack. But I'll let you know more about that. Hopefully we're able to get these made. I'm just waiting back to hear from them to see exactly how much these hats are going to cost us. And hopefully they can help us raise a little bit more funds to do this work and keep this thing going. So yeah, there you go. I just wanted to make that announcement that here's the first prototype of the Grace hat. That would be the design. No Revolution on it right now, because honestly, we can't afford to have more screen printing done. And someone was like, oh, I wish the A was red. I was like, that's what paint markers are for. See, this whole hat is paint markers, obviously. And paint. I like these paint brushes as well. So there you go. That's happening. Um, so listen, I'm gonna, yeah, you can make it pink too, pink and green. This is what that is. I like, I wish I could find even more neon pink. I really like neon. I like neon colors. It kind of reminds me like 70s punk, but mixed with a little like 80s vibe. Miami Vice, world's greatest TV show. Um, Full transparency, folks. I have been working my butt off, uh, doing my landscaping job. One of the things we did was, because I work on this property, and so one of these things we did is there's a sidewalk that runs out in the back, and so my boss, who owns this location, was like, "We need to. This sidewalk's falling down." So we dig these holes, three big holes into this long sidewalk, and this is only like a quarter of the sidewalk, so there's a lot more to do. And we put jacks, like car jacks, put three of them under there and lifted it, and then we put bricks in. Then we're gonna put some stuff under there and level out this sidewalk. So I've been doing that, and oh gosh, I put up some videos on Instagram and Facebook, and sometimes I'll put even some here on YouTube of just the work I'm doing, just kind of give you guys idea. Keeps me motivated to share what we're doing. But freaking loads and loads of bricks I've been carrying around in the wheelbarrow, loads and loads of shoveling dirt. I mean, it's like cross training. I felt like it was cross training. Cleaning areas, planting grass, tearing up grass, you name it, we do it. So I've been doing it this really a lot this past week, along with my after school job. And I'm really tired, and it's really tough to get these talks to where I want them. And so I might do another part in this. This was not meant to be a second part two to last week's Agape Love is Action, or Agape Love is Action. But it ended up being that because I've been doing a lot of study on group psychology, and I've been reading some psychology also behind religion and faith. And I just finished up a group psychology book by Freud, and I'm reading The Future of Illusion by Freud. You may know he's not a big fan of faith, but I am. But I'm reading that book just because, I think it's good to see what kind of often links us into our own faith, and how group think can affect it, and how often we replace God, or even don't even replace God. Just God becomes kind of a father figure or a safety figure or this, and then it's not about loving your neighbor as yourself. It's not about those things. And so I think the critique is good. Obviously, I don't agree that it's, not true, but I believe that but there's ways to look and examine our faiths through other people's eyes and how they see us, and especially through psychology and philosophy and theology, allows us to have a better look and help us to become more focused on what the real is and what kind of the unconscious will often lead to, or what pain or that we've been through. What we can do is sometimes project a different idea of what God is, rather than, and kind of go into that. So it's good to know those things. Like, what are we watching out for? What are we doing? Are we being a cliche? Are we getting into group think? Have we turned the Holy Spirit into group think, or into the ideal of a father or perfect father, or, that type of thing. So anyhow, been studying that a lot. I have been working my other two jobs a lot. My painting job has not been available because the guy I work for, gas is so expensive, and he works all over town, that he just can't afford to hire me right now. So that's been kind of tough. Um, Anyhow, all that to say, I'm exhausted. But the other, and so I'm not saying that this talk isn't tight. It's not as tight as I would like it to be, just because I haven't had the time. I also had my kids this weekend, which is not my weekend, but Karen, my ex, was really busy, so I took the kids and stuff. So I'm very tired. So just a little patience and grace for me would be great. I wanted to talk about though, like, we did years ago. I started, I've read about anarchy and Christian anarchy and things like this. And I will say I'm not an anarchist, um, but I'm a leftist. But there are some things in anarchy that I find very interesting, and often have how much people just think it's all about chaos and things like that. And anymore, they when they think about it, they think of more of like the punk rock, like like this kind of and they're like, "Ugh, chaos," and that's not really what it was about. And I'm going to share that with you in a minute. But because I was so tired, and I've got all my books all over the place, and I was like, "Oh, I've got to find where are those books that I had?" And so I reached out to Zoe, who they shared a lot of stuff with me about anarchy and that stuff to read and things like that. So I reached out to Zoe. Zoe helped me a bit yesterday with this talk. And so we're going to just cover a real bare minimum of that. I would have gotten into it deeper, but honestly, I just did not have the time. And but we're going to look at this. And so like I said, 3 years ago, grace is anarchy. Like this idea came to me of like, we're always trying to put grace into a box. We're always trying to put an asterisk next to grace. And I kept thinking like, what moves outside of like, oh gosh, like authority, or outside of our own rules and our own authorities, or church authority, or denominational authority, or the authority that what moves outside of. And then grace seems to always move outside of that, because people are always wanting to limit it, and they have this great fear of it. And especially growing up, I heard a lot of that. And even now I'll sometimes have pushback about grace. And so that concept came to me, and I remember the first time I was when I was going to talk about it, I was like, "Oh gosh, this could be crazy," but it worked, and we've been talking about it for years now, and it's really been something. And so last week we talked about agape love, and how agape love is it needs to be more of a principle in our lives, because it's not all about feelings and emotions. You know, uh, like Dr. King said, thank God Jesus said, "Love my enemies and not like my enemies," because I can't like somebody who firebombs my house. I can't like somebody who wants to lynch me or lynch my neighbors, but I can love them. And, further dive into that agape love. Who just wrote a book about agape love is uh, the biblical scholar. Oh gosh, his name is escaping me right now. Um, Bart Ehrman. Bart Ehrman just wrote a book about it. And it's really cool because Bart Ehrman is an atheist, and everybody's like, "Oh, Bart Ehrman's trying to destroy the church." And I listened to like a little interview he did, and it was like really impressive, because he's really talking about the power of agape love and all this. So here's somebody who lost their faith and everything, but saying like the Christianity idea of agape is super powerful, super amazing. And he's like, I'm worried that the church has lost it. And if you're really going to follow Jesus, this is a vital thing. But what we realize is like agape is like a choice, so it's like not when we feel emotions. Dr. King called it emotional. It's not emotional bosh, is what he said. You know, we don't have to have these feelings within inside us, but we still choose to act out of love, to meet a need, to be kind, to show grace even to those folks we don't feel like deserve it, and to love them that way. And it really makes more sense of loving your enemies. It doesn't become such an impossible standard. Um, yeah, I would love to take a few of his online courses, Paul. I think he's very bright and very interesting. The church, for a place that's like perfect love casts out all fear. I'll tell you what, the church is a place full of fear, man. I find demons and devils and badness, and it's like everything is bad. Everything is a critique. Everything is there's oh, it's scary. Oh, you can't. I'm like, you think someone spent their whole life studying something to just studying theology, or to get rid, to destroy Christianity? It's just ridiculous. It's just the ridiculousness goes on. So yeah, it's been a tough week. uh I've been exhausted. Yesterday was the No Kings rally. It was the first time I wasn't able to go because I was busy parenting and so exhausted. And my friends who I usually go with weren't here in town. Um, but I was really proud to see all the people out there. And so I posted something. It's so funny. I posted something about Donald Trump wanting to put his name on our money, it's usually like the treasurer secretary. I think James Baker was a guy for a long time because I remember seeing James Baker written on the money. So it'll be the first time a president's done that. And I just said, this is kind of ironic that, Christians think this is God's, and this guy wants to put his name on everything, picture everywhere. And I just, there's some irony there. And I'm surprised people don't see it. And, it's really wild. I got people attacking my family. Like I had two different people, and it's weird because it's just like these older evangelical folks, and they're just like, one said, "Oh, I'm so glad your mother's passed away and not here to see you like this." I'm like, I'm literally questioning the president, and you're saying this type of thing. And I had another person just recently read it this morning, like, "Oh, thank God your father adopted those kids. At least they'll carry on his legacy." I'm like, I just questioned a politician. I just questioned the authenticity of a politician. And it's so wild to see how we can't even disagree well without making it personal and not attacking one another. So it's hey Linda and Chuck, good morning or good afternoon. And so to me it's it's important that we talk about agape love. And so the other night I'm laying in bed and I'm thinking about agape, and I'm going through all the different things I've been learning about it, and all the things that Dr. King has said about agape, and some of my deeper studies. And I was going, I said, oh my gosh. I said, agape is a form of anarchy. It's one of those things where, and you'll find this, and that's a great thing because it's across the board, really, right and left, to kind of how they, oh, I don't know if I can love that person. Oh, it might trigger me and all this. And well, if agape is anarchy, I wanted to look at two different ways that could be, and how that would, one, how versus like a system, an ideology of thoughts, like how it works through that, but also how it with it, how it's anarchy within ourselves and with our own lives. So that's what we're going to look at today. So thank you, Zoe, for helping me. I'm going to read some of the stuff that Zoe shared with me, and stuff I knew, because there's a couple things that are really cool. But we're going to look at this. I've got my notebook here. Everything's falling out of it. Been doing the big notebook lately. I kind of enjoy it. Should have used bigger letters though, because I'm gonna have to look at it. But here's some of my notes. Anarchy is a no hierarchy of a leadership. It's focused on individual freedom, a free society of free individuals. Now, I'm going to make it clear, I'm not here to promote anarchy as a system for how we're going to run this country, but I'm here to show you why I think anarchy works not only within grace, but within agape, which agape is pretty much every time Jesus or even the Apostle Paul mention the word love, that is the word they're using, is agape. So there's a woman named Cindy Milston, and she writes that the A in anarchy represents the Greek anarchia, which means without rule or authority. And the circle would lead to, or is as, what did she said? Rendered or seen as the letter O. So the circle is actually an O. And some of the original anarchy symbols you'll see is that the A is actually in the middle, just like perfectly in the middle. And it's like an A with a circle around it. Like the A is not sticking out. It's not a punk rock. It's like just in the middle. But the letter O, standing for order or organization, a reference to Pierre Proudhon's definition of anarchism from his 1840 book, What is Property? So this idea that order is built within anarchy, which I thought was really interesting. So you've got this like, uh, without rule and authority, but also organized individuals living in freedom and organized. And I think about when Paul says, when he's talking about the leadership in Galatians, he's like, well, what they were didn't really matter to me. Even talking about some of the apostles, he's like, because God shows no favor. And the idea of grace really makes us a community of saints, that type of thing, and how interesting and beautiful that really is. Um, and it's funny because when you read about Marxism and anarchy, sometimes, Christianity is really not seen in a very good light there. But let's take tools, let's look at these tools and see how we can use them and bring them into our own. And so let's be a little bit even more, let's even be a little bit more anarchic, practice more anarchy by this. Prideaux said, as man seeks justice and equality, as a man seeks justice in equality, so society seeks order in anarchy. And so this idea is that there would be order within this is just the way we want to see justice and equality. Or I think Huey Newton, one of the Black Panthers, talked about peace, and he's like, but peace without justice is still oppression. It's just kind of a false peace or an oppressive peace. And that I feel that's important that we talk about justice as well, and the justice of Christ and what Christ has called us to love our neighbors and love our enemies. But we don't leave out justice, and I think that's vital. You could say loving your enemies is today, especially in today's world, would be considered uh, anarchy in a way. I mean, definitely across political and religious boundaries, it's a form of anarchy, because we're always looking for asterisks within grace. But now I think we're looking for asterisks also within love, and a form of love. Agape challenges us and is almost built for us to be able to still live our lives and feel emotions, to work these things out and continue to work towards justice, but do it in such a powerful way that really would eventually lead to reconciliation. And it's really why agape plays such a huge part in the nonviolence practice within the nonviolent system of nonviolence that Dr. King gave us, and the King Center still promotes and still teaches classes on. You can take. There's a lot of great books about nonviolence, and I think it's just vitally important. So how I wanted to look at this today is how would agape as anarchy, one, affect the system, and those are the questions we're going to ask as we go through some scriptures today. How is it effective and against the system, but also how it is effective within anarchy within ourselves? So not just anarchy within the system. How is agape anarchy within the system, but how is that love also anarchy within our own hearts and minds and emotions and thoughts and thinking process? Um, how does it affect groupthink and religion? You know, and unfortunately, sometimes groupthink and religion become a very similar thing or the same thing, with often not even realizing it. And that's sometimes the issue with why I will push back on traditions, or well, it's just this is how we think. I'm going, well, how we think, but let's make sure that there's some room for individual freedom within the faith. And I think uh, the Apostle Paul points that out to us. But what are we going to look at today? We're going to look at a few verses. We're going to look at a little bit of what Jesus says about agape love. And these are all going to be old standards, you've probably heard me talk about before. But this is all agape love. This is all about love today. So I'm working in grace only because grace as anarchy really hit me. years ago, but just a few nights ago, 2 nights ago, laying in my bed, it was like, oh my God, Agape is anarchy. And I thought, oh, this is going to make a lot of people happy. You know, everybody keeps accusing me of anarchy just because they see the symbol. And I get these really weird YouTube messages like, oh, don't you know that that's that? And how can you support that? And then they see the peace symbol and read into that. And, you know, I like it. It's like, hey, can you pick out the symbols that you want to read into and think are satanic? You know, even though I've given my life to this work. So we're going to start in Luke. Luke chapter 6. Stop me if you've heard this one before. Luke 6:27. And here we go. You've heard this before, but let's look at this what we're trying to do is put on a different light onto this, is see it within the agape love, where we're realizing we may have emotions that are contrary to love. There's a contradiction line there. And I think that's really interesting too, about Hegel's talking about contradiction, and dialectic thinking can also be worked into this kind of concept of like the dialectic of like, well, I don't feel this way, but I'm going to move this way. And allowing feelings and emotions to just sit and be. It's not that we're necessarily going to conquer them or push them down, but this might be a way to work through them and come to a different place. But the point is kind of like, we're just going to allow them to be. And, you know, I think people often worry that they're betraying themselves or they're betraying others when they love other people. But I think we can say like, okay, if Dr. King can say, well, I can't like someone who wants to hang my neighbor, to do that, but I can love them. You know, how does that work? If he can do it, then can we do it as well? Or is Dr. King some sort of special human being? He's not. He was very human, very human. So let's look at this. But I say to you that listen, love your enemies and do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who abuse you. If anyone strikes you on the cheek, offer the other also. And from anyone who takes away your coat, do not withhold even your shirt. Give to everyone who begs from you. And if anyone takes away your goods, do not ask for them again. Do to others as you would have them do to you. Goes on to say this, and I think this is an area where I got a little bit kind of confused with this thing, is because it says, if you love those who love, if you love those who love you, what credit is that for you? For even sinners love those who love them. If you do good to those who do good to you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners do the same. If you lend to those from whom you hope to receive, what credit is that? Even sinners lend to sinners to receive as much again. But love your enemies, do good, and lend, expecting nothing in return. Could you imagine if we did that? Some people argue that, well, Jesus thought the world was going to end in a year, so this is why he said, don't worry about getting paid back. It's wild how we figure out ways to work around this stuff. And they might be right. I don't know. Your reward will be greater and higher for children of the Most High, for he is kind, and talking about God, for he is kind to the ungrateful and the wicked. Be merciful just as your Father is merciful. But remember how we talked about agape as action. So where does this become a type of anarchy within the system? Well, if you start, what I found out, it's a lot easier to love your enemies than to love other people's enemies. Because often if you love other people's enemies, you realize that you have more enemies to love, because they go like, how could you do that? How could you don't you remember what they did? I remember my parents were so amazing at forgiving people. Both my parents, my mom and my dad. And they, even before my dad went to prison and after he got out of prison, he would have these sometimes invite people over from the past who I know really hurt him, really betrayed him, and said all these things. And they'd have dinner and they'd laugh and they'd do all these things. And I would just be like so pissed. I would just be so pissed because, I was a young teenager before dad went to prison. And I was like, how do you, do and dad? My dad always like, it's important. We got to forgive. You need to forgive. And I just was like, yeah, but sit down and like make dinner and like have conversation with these people. Like, how dare you let them get away with this? After what they did. Like, so I understood that feeling. And in some ways, I think with agape love, when Paul talked about in one of the verses where he says, when I was in Corinthians 13, when I was a child, I acted like a child, but when I became an adult, I put away childish things. And the fact is realizing like you can still have hurt and pain towards someone. You can still have anger towards someone and treat them differently. And I don't think you necessarily have to say like, okay, well, everything's fine, or I'm going to hold on to this anger. But you're putting yourself in a position to be able to disagree well, to have a tough conversations, to do this type of thing when you're able to love those folks that you disagree with. It doesn't mean you like them. And I'll tell you what, like as I say, progress, not perfection, but also like this is a really hard thing to do. I've been trying to make a point of trying to do this over the past 7 days since we talked about it last Sunday. And it's easy to just really just like put it away. Like just to take this whole like love your enemy, do okay, I'm gonna try to treat some people nice who say mean things. And it's really easy for me just to be like, I totally forgot until after the situation happened. Like even like my conscience is like, yeah, let's get rid of that for now. Maybe that's not, so it's a tough thing to do. It's tough when you hear this. And when I've done this before, we had a lot of conversations years ago. I would say about 3 or 4 years ago, we would talk about loving people from a distance. And I kind of think that's what it means when it says pray for them. But for some of us who have matured enough and grown enough and maybe dealt with our pain, not completely, but we're able to see, okay, I can see that when my enemy is thirsty to give them, when I have, like Dr. King said, when you have the chance to defeat an enemy, nonviolence does not do that. You don't defeat them. Agape doesn't do that. Grace doesn't do that. So it is a form of anarchy, especially for me, when I think a lot of people who are in would be more like-minded with me are often the ones who really struggle with that. I find more of my conservative brothers and sisters to be more delusional about what love is. And they think that they're, by being angry and cruel, they think that's love. Um, a lot of my more progressive or left brothers and sisters on the left side of things uh, seem to be more just like know that being angry and mean to them isn't necessarily love. Telling the truth, I believe, is in love, but there's a way to do that. I think we can be gentle and kind and graceful and still be honest and clear and straightforward. But I think for a lot of them, they're just like, well, I can't do it. So what happens is when you start to do this, the system that you're in, the community you're in might be like, I confused, might actually get angry, might even lose your job if you love the wrong people. I've learned that is, people abandon you often when you love the wrong people or when you confront the wrong people about certain things. But again, this is not an emotional love. This is not eros. This isn't a love where you're going like, oh, I want to be around this person and I miss this person. It's not like loving your family. It's not even a friendship love. It's a love that decides to be loved no matter what emotions are going on and what's going on. So it's anarchy against your own emotions. It's anarchy against certain things. Now, there's going to be times where your gut says, this isn't safe. This isn't where I should be. This isn't what I need to do. And things you've learned, then don't do it. I'm not saying that in every aspect you should do this and be killed for it. arguably a lot of our greater leaders who did this did die for these type of things and for being so inclusive. So that's one way to look at it. It goes on and to say your reward will be great and you will be children of the Most High, for he is kind to the ungrateful and to the wicked. Be merciful just as your Father is merciful. And so we're showing, this idea of doing good to those who hate you, blessing those who curse you, and praying for those who abuse you, turning the other cheek and that type of thing is a choice. That is where it becomes a principle. And so I think agape as anarchy has to be a principle, just as grace as anarchy has to be a principle. I mean, these two are obviously related and intertwined with one another. It's like the sacred and the secular aren't separate, they're within one another. So this is a tough road to haul, but one worth looking at, one worth thinking about it. And I think when we're able to go, okay, this is a bit of an anarchy, not to just the system, but to my own system, we're able to go, oh, okay, so we're able to kind of keep ourselves in check a little bit, kind of hold ourselves accountable to this. I'm not in any place where I want to hold somebody else accountable to this idea, because right now I'm still working on it. I'm still thinking about it. I'm still trying to just take it apart, put it back together, and dive deeper into it. Let's look over at Luke 14. I put everything in order just because I'm so exhausted that I didn't want to jump around and try to do all that today. But here we are, Luke 14, 13. Luke 14, 13 says, oh, I'm going to start with 12 because this is about the dinner guests and hospitality and things like this. But 14:12 says, he said also to the one who had invited him, when you give a luncheon or a dinner, do not invite your friends or your brothers or your relatives or rich neighbors in case they may invite you in return and you would be repaid. But when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind, and you will be blessed because they cannot repay you, for you will be repaid in the resurrection of righteousness. And this whole idea of, so this agape love comes with even into the within to the least of these as well. And I think what we find with that is that you're going to see philo, that friendship type of love comes a lot easier when you're working with the least of these, but it's hard. But it's saying, like, don't just be kind to those who love you. Don't just be kind to those who can repay you. Don't just love those people, but love those people who are in need. And that's what we're called to do, even when we don't necessarily feel it. And so that's where that kind of dying to flesh and that sacrificial thing comes into play. We've been kind of sold a bill of goods that it's all about culture and music and tobacco and alcohol and sex and drugs and rock and roll. I mean, all those things probably have certain things in there that we need to be careful about in order to be able to do these things. But, the dying to your flesh is, I mean, I did a conservative evangelical podcast like a week and a half ago, and the guy was so concerned with gay folks more than he was the poor or the least of these. Or, I mean, maybe not, maybe he would say differently, but this seemed to be the fact that I have, that I'm affirming of my LGBTQ brothers and sisters, seemed to be more of a concern than the fact that we're in the midst of a war and that people can't pay their rent and people are suffering every day. And so we end up majoring in minors and thinking, and he kept saying, well, you have to give things up. You have to sacrifice for God. And I'm like, well, isn't grace free? Aren't we, isn't salvation a gift? Well, then also we have to do something. I said, this is bait and switch. And I really do still believe that. But this idea that if we want to really put in the work is loving people who aren't easy to love. It's getting outside of our comfort zone, and it's to do it with the hope of reunion and the hope of restoration. And so restoration isn't just like, okay, so when somebody falls, we, send them off to a therapy center and get them therapy and counseling. And then a year later, we let them do their thing again. No, it's kind of a lifestyle of, being patient with the other, with making these decisions to love the other, even when inside we go, I don't like this person, but I can love them and I can use agape love. My emotions are not towards this person, this type of person is giving me pain, but I'm going to choose to do this principle of loving them anyway, with the hope of maybe one day reunion or restoration or to better them or to free them, and that they may able to even get what I have. Because for me, that's always been the idea, is making for reformation is the church is a safer place. And how can we do that? And it's just to choose love. Dr. King said, I have to stick with love because hate is too much of a burden to bear. And hate brings in all this resentment and this hurt and this pain. And you see so many people who deal with such hurtful pain and such hate, but it's not killing the person they hate, it's destroying them. It's making them almost unable to be social. It's making them unable to almost work with the least of these or work with others without saying, well, you look like the type of person I hate. So it's hard for me, so they start to strike out at you and do these things. And Dr. King knew that hate makes hate. It's a cycle, just like violence. Violence begets violence, begets violence. Hate and anger, and all, it just kind of goes over again. So if we choose to love and choose to take the higher road, if we think about, well, what is the narrow road versus the wide road, it would be loving people who are difficult to love. I think a prime example of that is teachers. And the reason I know is because in the after school program, I see the teachers getting off work every day and them staying a couple hours after work and doing everything they need to do and working with kids and trying their best to help these kids, having to reach out to individual parents and stuff when they're struggling and when the class is struggling and they're losing control of their class. But they choose to love because they love to teach. They care about these kids and they care about their future. And they don't choose who the kids are going to be or what they are, where they're growing up or what their personalities are, but they deal with that and they do it in a professional way because they know that this is what's going to help them move forward. Is this education? Is this understanding? Is this growth? And so they do that. And so in a way, we have to kind of see ourselves as teachers of agape, teachers of grace. That's what we're here to do. And we're not going to be able to pick every single person that comes into our lives and every situation that comes into our lives. We know we're in a horrible situation. We see how divided the world is right now. We see how divided people are. And if we've learned anything from social media, we realize that being cruel and angry and arguing and calling each other's names is not making a difference. It seems to be widening the gap. So the only way we could do this is by choosing by taking the road less traveled, the narrow road. For me, the narrow road, I used to think of it was just being a legalistic, judgmental, angry Christian growing up. I thought that's what it was, being a perfect person who didn't do anything wrong and made sure everybody else didn't do anything wrong. And that's not what it's about. I'm going to love people even when they do stuff wrong. I watched a clip the other day of Mark Driscoll, and I was just like so surprised because he was talking about men and manliness, and oh, you turn on the TV and there's all the men are looked like idiots and they do all this stuff, and there's no men to look at, and it was all about like this, the place of the man and the place. And I get that men are insecure and they have a high rate of suicide. I think that's horrible. But for me, seemed like it was like, for him, it was about like, how do we reclaim kind of the masculinity that's like, I don't give a damn, I'm the man, and I'm going to put people in their place. And for me, I'm going like, well, what about if we just scratch that and we choose to love, and we lead by love, and we lead by grace, and we lead by this agape love, and that we make the hard decisions and the tough decisions? To me, it's much more uh, it's much more difficult to love people who don't love me than it is to be like, I'm going to just draw a line in the sand and be a tough bastard and be a man of God and tell you like it is. For me, it's harder to be like, well, I'm going to tell you like it is, but I'm going to do it in a respectful, compassionate way. To me, that's really where it becomes a struggle. And to me, I think that's why it's a type of anarchy, because you're pushing against these folks who are stubborn or angry, who've got, their gender confused with their faith, and their God is confused with their dad or some sort of like, manly man in the sky. Um, you know, anyway, I digress. Let's jump over to John. John 15. Do any of you like follow along with your Bibles, or you just listen to me read? Is there anybody sitting there and they're like, oh, we're going to John 15? You're with your computer. Oh, let's go there. Let's do it, Jay. Then any of your pages wrestling? John 15. That was a question. Feel free to answer if you're still here. John 15. You can say no. No's okay. I won't judge you. I mean, I will judge you, but I'll love you. I'll love you as a form of agape. Just kidding. Okay, Galatians 15. Galatians. Oh, there's a Freudian slip. John 15:12. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. No one has greater love than this, is to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friend if you what I command you. I do not call you servants any longer, because the servant does not know what the master is doing. But I have called you friends, because I have made known to you everything that I have heard from the Father. But what I like this is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. No greater lover than this lays down one's life for one's friends. And I think we always see this, especially in the concept of crucifixion, because this was obviously written after that, is the laying down the life of being a martyr or dying for someone, or oh, I've got to be crucified, and all this stuff. But if you think about laying down your life in a way of saying, I'm going to let my emotions be in control. I'm not going to let my emotions be in control, but I'm going to learn to try to be better at controlling those emotions, controlling my anger, controlling my dislike, in order to love others and to create better friends. And when I disagree with family and friends and loved ones and enemies, I am going to make the effort to put love into action, to practice a type of anarchy that is an anarchy even to my own emotional system, to at least treat people better than they treat me. That's where agape becomes anarchy, into our own system and to our own selves and towards self. But it's also that part of, when we think about it, that part can feel like that, without rule or authority, like my emotions don't have authority. But it's also that the O in the anarchy, it's also order. It's saying, I'm going to go with order within this. I'm going to allow us to be individual people living lives, but I'm also going to have some order in it, and I'm going to decide how the order goes by agape, by allowing agape to kind of kick against certain emotions and feelings. It's definitely not easy. Even when that whole agape talk we did last week, when I got done, I was so exhausted, because there were so many like little like old thoughts of how I grew up religious and how it was so different than that, and how it was like, oh, because I always thought I had to like feel it. Like I had to just like create it. Like loving my enemy, I had to really like feel about them like I feel about my friends and things like that. I really felt like had to be some like within that. But there can be complete disapproval in that and still show love. And imagine if religious conversations or disagreements, like this, a disagreement about me saying something about Donald Trump putting his name on money, on all of our money. Um, you know, those people probably wouldn't have been like, "Well, thank God your mother is gone because I would hate for her to be," I mean, like that type of conversation would not even happen. We wouldn't be like destroying one another, going and personally attacking one another when we choose that. And did that get me? No, it got me angry. I mean, I reposted it because I was angry and I wanted people to see how hurtful it was. It really hurt me. So, um, how we talk to one another just even could be different. And I'm not saying be fake or be passive aggressive. What I'm saying is just, you know, let agape be a principle in your life. Let it be a discipline, just like karate or a diet or a way of life. It becomes a discipline. And of course, those things all at the beginning are very hard. Like I remember typing, like, I'm still a bad typer, but when I first went into typing and they're like, leave your hands here. And then my typing teacher would come over and I would be like, poop, toop. And she's like, Jay, get your hands back there. And I'm like, okay. And I'm like, but after a while I was able to kind of like, oh, now I know where it became kind of this like this discipline of, okay, stop looking. And I started to realize, oh, I know where the keys are now. I know this. And then the other day, my daughter was like, "Where's this letter?" And I put my hands right where I had my typing teacher had taught me back. I guess they don't do typing anymore, but in high school, and I put my hands there and go, "Oh, there it is," because I just knew from if my hands were in the right place, if I knew the discipline, I could go click, click, click. And so I was, oh, there it is. And so, and I thought, I'm dyslexic. I'm never going to need this. Why am I doing this? But there was still a little discipline there that changed things, where it's like, agape, it's an acquired taste. It takes time to appreciate it and time to learn it. But just to look at it as a discipline or, yeah, I think looking at agape as a discipline would be very helpful for us. Now we're going to jump into Matthew. So we are going to go back again, I guess. Yes. Matthew 5. And that's the Beatitudes. You guys know we love the Beatitudes here at Revolution. This is when I think some people, when they're like, oh, they talk about woke stuff. Sometimes some of the wokes, I'm like, have you read the Beatitudes? There's pretty pretty sensitive and wokey, don't you think? But in Matthew 5:38, it says, "You have heard it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist evildoers. But if anyone strikes you on the right cheek," so we're kind of rereading the same thing that was in Luke, the Beatitudes in Luke, but we're reading them now in Matthew. "And turn the other also." So this idea is it's, and I've heard all sorts of things like, well, if you turn the other cheek, then they have to hit you with the back of the hand, and that makes you equal and all that kind of stuff. And but if we look at it of going like, if we look at it in a way of nonviolence, if we look at it a way of saying, okay. And so you have to think when folks are hearing this, especially Jewish believers are hearing the man who's claiming to be the Messiah say, well, the old law was an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But now I say if someone strikes you on the other cheek, you turn the other cheek. You have to admit they were probably thinking this guy is a fool. This guy is an idiot. What is he thinking? Doesn't seem very manly to me to turn the other cheek. I have to talk to my son a lot about this, because one of his friends got bullied and he stood up for him and all this stuff. And my son was like, well, I won't be the first to hit, but I'll be the last. And I was like, son, let's talk about violence and what violence does and why violence doesn't solve things. And started talking to him. I'm like, you really have this power of always being very compassionate and sweet towards people, buddy. And you know how to communicate with people. And I'm like, and there is your strength, is to communicate with the other and to get through that. So when it says, this is, I have always thought that Jesus said, love your enemies, but never said, make your enemies your friends. And that's right. I mean, you don't, your enemies may never become your friends. I would say the hope is with rest. The hope is that one day maybe they'll become friends and that there'll be a restoration there and that there will be a bigger community there. I think that's always the hope. I think restoration and reunion is always the hope desired, but not necessarily the reality of the life and the worlds that we live in. And so we kind of have to learn to also, when we're doing this, is that we have to accept life on life's terms. And that can be difficult. So this is a very difficult thing to do. It goes on to say, and if anyone wants to sue you, yeah, okay, we read that. And if anyone wants to force you to go, oh yeah, and then if anyone wants to force you to go a mile, also go the second mile. And the second, the idea of the Roman soldier only had to carry his pack 1 mile, but I'll go an extra mile. There, within there, that's the anarchy of agape, is saying, I'm going to go even further than I'm asked. I'm going to be kinder than I am forced to be. I'm going to show something there. Now, I don't think Jesus was doing this so we suffer. I don't think this was a commandment, an idea of like, well, here, we'll add this to the religion and this will really make them, make that person suffer. And that's how I, grew up as a child, hearing about religion and seeing how religion was practiced and growing up in the Assemblies of God. I always thought God was kind of this kind of angry God, like, I'm watching you, you better do these things. And, I was like, God just wants us to be sacrificial. And then I read that verse and like, I want you to be compassionate. I don't want your sacrifices. I want you to show mercy. You're like, oh. And so here we are seeing is that we are the ones being asked to show mercy. This isn't to hurt us. If anything, it is to be an example of the love of God and what God is and the infinite idea of love, sharing that with another finite being and showing what the possibilities of love are like. And, I think we've all probably had experiences where we've had someone say something kind to us or nice to us, coming from someone maybe we didn't expect or think, and how that, gave us a feeling. Or, my kids, every time they go play, and I had not taught them to do this. Every time they go on a play date and they go, hey, thank you for having us. Thank you so much for having me over today. And I was so impressed with that, and I told my son, I was like, wow, that was great. I'm like, did your mom tell you to do that? I was like, I don't know. I just thought that was the right thing to do. And then my daughter saw me say that. And then I watched my daughter go to a play date and she's, hey, thank you for having me. Thank you so much. And it was like this kind of, oh, wow, that's really nice. And this encouragement just to be kind. And it's like, oh, that's great. And so this kindness kind of spreads and goes forward, And so going that extra mile with someone, I know for me that when I was a kid and even a teenager and in my 20s and my 30s and in my 40s and now in my 50s, there have been people who've been willing to go the extra mile with me, and it's contagious. And their emotions do start to play into it because that kindness, that going the extra mile when someone doesn't have to do that. I had a friend who flew in once when I was getting some medical treatment, and they had no reason to be there or anything, but they flew in and they took me to the treatments and they did all this stuff. And I was really out of it and really sick, and they were there for me. And that meant so much to me, and I wanted to do that more and more. Like every minute when my kids, anytime they leave, they get hugs, 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 hugs. My dad wasn't a big hugger. My mom was, but not all the time. But I had a security guard when I was a kid named Tommy Stamps. And other security guards just dropped me off. And Tommy, every time he dropped me off, he was like, where's my hug? Where's my hug? And, and that guy taking a few minutes to hug, I was his job to watch after me, to make it personal, to go beyond that, to show me that I was worthy of being loved and cared for, made me realize like there's not a day that's going to go by where my kids go to school or come back from school or go to practice or do it where I don't hug them. And it's a full hug, 2-armed hug. Oh, where's that other arm? And so it's pretty great. So you never know. Um, Gonna jump down a little bit further here. Where are we going to? We're gonna go to all the way to 48, folks. So go that second mile. Give everyone who begs from you, and do not refuse anyone who wants to borrow from you. But like again, I said, it seems like the extra miles of it could be a form of anarchy, you know. Um, You have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. Now, remember, this is radical for these folks. This is what they were told: love your neighbor and hate your enemy. You've heard that. That's been the tradition. And here Jesus is taking it up to another point. And so you can see for them how this was a type of reformation and a type of way of breaking out of a system. Like, wait a second, this system of like love, this doesn't work. Like, this is how we've always done it. There's really good I feel satisfied when I'm able to get, hate my enemy and get revenge. And Jesus, and you've heard that, but I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be children of your Father in heaven, for he makes the sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the righteous and on the unrighteous. I mean, just imagine if like legalistic people were legalistic about that. How good that would, at least we'd have really cool conversations. At least we'd be able to have conversations. At least we would be able to go places and not get personal or sending each other to hell or be rebuked in the name of Jesus. This is wash and wear. This is rubber hit the road. This is real stuff. This isn't like magical thinking. This is just saying, okay, I'm going to do a principle. I'm going to learn this as a discipline. This is going to be a discipline within my own life. You can say I talked about discipline today, and people are like, oh, Jay Baker might be heading in the right direction. He's talking about discipline. But I like looking at it as a discipline of not like you're being punished for something, but in a discipline of you're learning something. You're learning something that doesn't only protects you, but protects the other. Like some martial arts are all defense. So you're not going to kill the person, but the person's never going to hit you. You know what I mean? And in this way, this is a kind of a self-defense that's also trying to help that person, maybe not with the next person, because maybe they'll see that and learn from that, and that kindness and that love will go infinite. And I believe that love is that way. I believe grace is that way. I believe there's infinite parts of those things that are beyond our control that makes a difference. I mean, you think about when in Birmingham and the videos during the civil rights, and the people saw the police being so violent and saw the people not reacting to the violence and the people not fighting back. And it showed the world there's a horrific problem in this one. And if you think about it, those folks had every right to defend themselves and to fight back if they wanted to, but they chose not to. They chose agape. They chose the discipline of nonviolence. And then the world woke up to there was an issue. There's a problem. And we need more of that in this world today. If you love those who love you and what reward do you have? I love this part. Do not even tax collectors do the same? I like that it's in the book of Matthew, because, Matthew was actually in the midst of tax collecting when Jesus called him. There's a kind of anarchist way of thinking, especially when you have zealots in your disciple group, in your gang. And what I like about the end of Matthew is it says, be perfect, therefore, 5 is be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect. And the idea is that this is where, this discipline in a way is like how is God's love for us. And it's like, how do we imitate God? How do we imitate Christ? Matthew 7. Matthew 7:12 says, and everything do to others as you would have them do to you, for this is the law of the prophets. And something that I never really noticed before, but I like this idea is in everything, do to others as you would have them do to you. But look at it, do to others and then do to you. And here is the, again, of the discipline or the, of it is that you're doing to others, not because the idea of loving others as you love yourself, that's going to be almost impossible, right? Because we all have a bit of, you know, I can't remember the words I'm looking for, but we all can be a little bit selfish at times. But it's saying do to other. So when you treat others, when you see an enemy within somewhere and you treat them as you would want to be treated, and you don't do that with just your enemies, but with the least of these and with your friends, you treat them how you'd want to be treated. And that is agape. It's that principle again. It's that discipline of putting that into work and allowing this type of love, an anarchy love, an anarchy agape that says, I don't feel like doing this. This might trigger me, but you know what? You're probably going to be triggered either way. If you walk away angry, you're going to carry it with you. If you scream at them, you're probably going to feel bad about it later. But to treat them as you'd want to be treated, that's also going to throw that person off. That's also, like the Bible says, it can feel like hot coals on their head, because there's something different to that. And as Dr. King said, this is the only thing capable of turning that person from an enemy into a friend. And that's where that idea of reunion lies. The beloved community. Look into nonviolence. It always, those incons, that beloved community is like a whole different new way of, there's a lot of work, a lot of justice work, a lot of legal work, a lot of social change, so much work to get to that beloved community. But the beloved community is kind of this goal of us living together and different, and almost as though, like when Paul said in Galatians, don't bite and devour one another. But at the end, he also says, restore one another. If you think you're too good to help someone else, you're only fooling yourself. What was that? It was Matthew 7. Matthew 25. Look at me. I've been like, I just wanted to show you all these little examples where I felt like it stuck out to me in my mind that these were kind of like, oh, this kind of like this now agape makes more sense to me now, that because I don't have to have the like emotion or the philo emotion or the ero emotion. It just, for me, it's kind of freeing, and seeing it as kind of that grace without grace is anarchy, seeing agape as anarchy. I just think it's this thing that says, I'm not going to let a system control how I treat others. I'm not going to allow the big other. I'm not going to allow society. I'm not going to allow culture. I'm not going to allow groupthink. I'm not going to allow even my own self to control taking the higher road, to taking the narrow road, to doing these things to betterment of this world, to what would really lead to reformation, to really lead to reformation, restoration, and to a better world. And I know, like, I remember just as a kid, and I said this in the last talk, is, there were sometimes these older folks who would just treat you with such love and such respect. It would be just mind boggling, and it was as though they understood agape. My mother understood agape. Like when we beat it, these people would say awful things to her, and you could see, and often some photos, you can see really the sadness that my mother carried with her. There was a lot of pain there. And that's why she wore so much makeup, because she didn't feel worthy. She covered up to keep herself protected and safe. And she thought she was ugly, and she felt a lot of pain, but she gave out love, gave out love, gave out love. And I just countless times saw people come up and say these horrible things to her, where I would have been like, piss off, man, get away. My kids are here. What, just like, and she goes, oh, well, you don't even know me. What's your name, honey? And introduce yourself and talk to them and do this. I mean, I one time saw her take a group of kids and buy them dinner and, and ate and sat down with them. And it started out with them making fun of her. She knew how to live agape in a personal way, didn't have to have anybody watching, didn't have anything to do with that. Just I'm going to love those who don't love me. I'm going to love my enemies. And she really just did that to the point it was like second nature to her, you know? And, and to be her son and to be there and seeing it firsthand. And I wanted to defend my mother and stand up for her and fight for her, like probably Mark Driscoll would tell me to do. But instead, my mom was like, no, put down your sword. It's like she was almost putting people's ears back on, and she was being Jesus, and now they've made films about her and Broadway plays about her and documentaries about her because she had this idea of agape love that she practiced it to such a point. It was such a discipline of hers that it became second nature. And it wasn't just an action that she was disciplining herself to the point when she died, she was like a master. She was the master. She felt it. She really cared about it. She really loved people. She even really loved her enemies, not just in a way of an agape, but in a way of emotion and heart and spirit. And it just flowed through her. When she passed away, I never saw her body. And they were like, "Do you want to go in and sit with your mom?" My sister needed to do. I did. I said no, because my mother was life. She was love. She was grace. She was hope. She was silly. She could lose her temper sometimes if she was really hungry, hangry. But she was all these things. And I was like, that's not her. It was what that agape, that love, that grace, that hope, that humanity, even even the bad parts were all the her, and that's not there. Again, I do apologize. I am really exhausted, folks. I do the manual labor is really at 50 at my age is just I'm tired. I'm just tired, and I haven't had a lot of time to myself to really kind of get my strength back. So I do apologize if I seem a bit out of it. I'm just very exhausted and doing my best here to get this ready for you. Matthew 25. 35. Where are you? 35. Yes, let's start at 44. Then the king will say to those in his right hand, yes, come you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you welcomed me. Now listen to that. I was a stranger and you welcomed me. How many of you feel stranger danger constantly? I was naked and you gave me clothing. I was sick and you took care of me. I was in prison and you visited me. And you think about these things and how these things have almost become a minor thing or a thing that certain groups do, and they'll do the things, but they won't give agape love to, they'll say, oh, sometimes people will just do these things and then not give agape love to the other people they believe with. It's very selective. So there is times where people will focus just on these things and then, well, look what we do. And then they're just horrible people to be around. I've seen that firsthand. It's complex. That's why I think this is like there's a mastery to this, because it's like you can love the least of these and then not love your enemies as well, or you can love your enemies and not love the least of these. You know what I mean? Usually, you're probably, if you don't love your enemies, you're probably not going to really love the least of these. And here's another issue: is that the least of these, people seem to think what's within a border, or it's a skin tone, or it's an identity of who they love and who are the least of these. And for me, when you don't see children in a school being bombed as the least of these, you've lost it. You've become a selective. Agape no longer is for all people. And I think that's what we have to do as agape, as anarchy again, is it's also for the world. It's not just for Americans. It's not just for people in my tribe. It's not just for people within my way of seeing things. It's everything. I was in prison and you visited me. And then they go, oh Lord, when did we see this? When did you do that? As you did the least of these, you also did to me. And I think that's also that form of agape, is when we do that for those who can't help us and can't do things. And there's so many, It's just being selfless is not an easy job. And I really do believe that it's just a form of not allowing culture and society to overwhelm us, and then not allowing politics and religion to keep us divided. And I think one of the biggest radical acts of anarchy, of grace and agape, is to just say, I'm not going to have a tribe. More often when I think about this, and I think about revolution being online and not being an in-person community, sometimes I think there's a strength within that. It's because we are not necessarily a community or a tribe, but we are a group of people who share a way of thinking, but a thinking that we're out there constantly within different worlds with one another. We're just in different places and different things, doing different things and trying to practice this all over the place. And that is not, there's something in it of being like, okay, we're not necessarily this, what the world says a community is, or what a world thinks. I mean, I still think we're a community, but just in a much different way. Hebrews. Didn't think I'd be going into Hebrews. Even I didn't think that. And we're going to end with Romans, and we're almost done. Well, actually, we're going to end with John, but we're almost done. Hebrews 13, 1 through 3 says, let mutual love continue. Do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers. Now, if we're supposed to show hospitality to strangers, how much more are we to want to see the best for people we don't know? How much are we, if we show them hospitality, don't we want them also to have affordable health care, work, affordable rent? If we want them to be treated like we're treated, don't we want them to have those things, to not have to live in a world where they're fearful of being killed and destroyed? Show hospitality to the strangers. And by doing that, some have entertained angels without knowing it. Ooh. Remember those who are in prison as though you were in prison with them. Did you hear that? Remember those who are in prison as though you were in prison with them. Those who are being tortured as though you yourself were being tortured. And there is empathy. So when these folks say empathy is sin or things like that, it's just not, it's anti-Christ, it's anti-biblical, it's anti-Christianity. When they say that, that's a terrific thing. Because look at this right here in Hebrews, it's telling us to empathize so much as though we were in the prison with the prisoner, as though we are the ones being tortured, as though we were the ones being bombed, as though we were the ones being taken by ICE and put into ICE facilities. It's saying, I want you to empathize with them to that extent, is to love them to that extent. That is the radical agape I'm calling you to. And you saw that happen in Minnesota. You saw that happen more with people who weren't not most of them. I don't know. A lot of people who weren't Christians or believers or things like that. Some of them may have been, some of them, I don't know. But you saw agape practice in Minneapolis. You saw people doing that, loving their neighbor who was an other, who was a stranger, but they knew that this is my neighbor, and showing agape and showing up for one another. And we see that. And yet the church has got a call to that, and we ignore it, and we bite and devour one another. We tear one another apart, while other people are out there actually doing the work of agape. Even when the government says you can't do it, even when the government says it's illegal and it's against the law. That's when it becomes anarchy, folks. Then let's jump into Romans. What does Paul say? Paul. Hey, we're going to get to Paul. I like Paul. Hebrews, I'm not quite sure if that's Paul or not, to be honest with you, but actually Paul. Let's look at Romans 12. Romans 12, 9 through 21. Let love be genuine. Hate what is evil. Hold fast to what is good. Love one another with mutual affection. Outdo one another in showing honor. Do not lag in zeal. Be ardent in spirit. Serve the Lord. Rejoice in hope. Be patient in suffering. Persevere in prayer. Contribute to the needs of the saints. Extend hospitality to strangers. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse them. Rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. And now that's a great part of agape as well, is we're going to, maybe we're getting pushed a little bit more just to be empathetic at first. Maybe we're being pushed a little bit more to help those who are suffering first. Maybe that's the road to being able to build that discipline in order to love people that we don't necessarily love, is to at least say, okay, I'm going to suffer with those who suffer. I'm going to joy with those who joy. Do not claim to be wiser than you are. Gosh, no kidding. I talk to so many people and you would think that they've got the corner on truth. Do not repay evil for evil, but take it though it was noble in the sight of all. It is possible, so far as it depends, you live peacefully with others, with all, not with others, with all. Beloved, never avenge yourselves, but leave room for the wrath of God, for it is written, vengeance is mine, will repay, saith the Lord. I remember there's a song, a guy goes, and God says, vengeance is mine. What a lucky man. No, if your enemies are hungry, feed them. If they are thirsty, give them something to drink. For by doing this, you will heap burning coals on their heads. See, there you go. For those of us who still feel we need to twist something a little bit, there's a partner. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. And see, that's the anarchy, and the good part of the order of anarchy is you're doing this in order to overcome evil for good. This is the agape coming in and saying, we are choosing good. We are choosing the road less traveled. We are not going to stoop to this level. And that was when we're going to practice, even when it's hard for us to do, even when our emotions are in a different place. We're going to learn to deal with that, and we're going to use this principle and this discipline for the greater good, for the good of all. Not easy stuff, folks. Not easy stuff at all. Romans 13, just one over. Romans 13, 8 and 10 say, no one anything, owe nobody anything except to love one another. For the one who loves another has fulfilled the law of the commandments. You shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not covet. And any of the other commandments are all summed up in these words: love your neighbor as yourself. Love does no wrong to neighbor, therefore love is fulfilling the law. Which is really interesting, because I always think about Matthew 5, what is it? 5:7, I think, where Jesus said, I did not come to abolish the law, but to fulfill it. But if that seen through this lens, it's to show agape, to show love, and to hopefully be, overcome evil with good, to turn an enemy into a friend. And look at that, because I love that part here at the end of Romans 12. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. If you look at someone like John Hume, the peacemaker in Northern Ireland, and you look at people like Dr. King or people like Gandhi, this was the reason for what these ideas that they practiced is there's a lot of horrible, horrific things going on. And if I trust my gut reaction, we might just end up in a cycle of violence and revenge and fighting, and stay within evil, and evil will stay. But I want to overcome it with good. And wasn't that really the whole point at the end of the Return of the Jedi with Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker? So I'm going to end with 1 John. Because 1 John is kind of like just like the love letter, the love book, if you will. 1 John 4, 1 John 4:12. Where is 12? Where are you, 12? No one has ever seen God, but if we love one another, God lives in us, and his love is perfected in us. By this we know that we are abide in him, and he in us, because we have given us the Spirit, and we have seen and to testify that the Father has sent his Son as a Savior to the world. Now look at this, the Spirit. But we know that we're able to in him, and he is in us because he has given us the Spirit. But all here is what's saying here in the book of John is saying, we'll be, Paul's saying it, Jesus is saying it, we'll be known by our love for one another. We love our enemies, love the least of these, love these folks. And how do we know that we have the Spirit? I often have people say, well, if they had the Spirit, they wouldn't be this or they wouldn't be that. But he's saying with the Spirit is love. I would go as far to say that we see people who are following agape love, who have the Spirit, who've never claimed Christ, who don't operate in Christianity, but you know who they are by their love for one another. You can see the fruits within their life, and that they are closer to the kingdom of God than most believers. So there you go with 1 John 12:8. And also within 1 John in 8, it says, who does not love does not know God, for God is love. And so when we practice agape as this type of anarchy towards our enemies, towards the least of these, towards ourselves, we are practicing God. We are practicing the infinite. We are finite beings in touch with the Spirit or the infinite that is controlling us and that is showing us that we're disciplining in ourselves, is that the Spirit of God is real, and that reality does not lay within some old man in the sky or some religious being or some ghost, but within the actions and the principles that we have chosen to love others. We love because we are loved. We are accepted, and we know that grace. So we know about this grace. We know how much it is. We know that we are accepted. So how do we put that forward? And we do that through agape, because agape is giving us the freedom to do it when we don't feel like it, when we don't like it, when we don't want to do it, but also giving us this growth system to live in grace and to live and know that we don't have to be perfect. We know that we have grace in there. We know we're going to screw up. We know we're going to make mistakes. But over time, by allowing us to have that freedom in that, and it not being the point of like, if we don't do this, we're going to go to hell or anything like that, but knowing that we're overcoming evil with good, it finally allows us to grow into this type of perfection. And we put away the childish things, because the childish things are getting revenge, arguing with the other person, tearing them apart. And you will see me do that as well. You will see me fault at this all the time. None of us are going to be perfect at this, but this is a goal to maybe see, how can we make this an instinct? How can it become such a discipline that it's second nature to us? And I kept using karate and things like that because I took a few lessons when I was a kid and things. And the point wasn't like, okay, I know how to do it, and then someone comes up and you're like, because you have to be like, you want it to be like, and that's why you make it a discipline, so it becomes second nature. That's why some people are just, that's why he's typing, because there's some people just type like insane. And, they didn't start out that way. And it becomes nature. And I know this nature is a reality because I knew that my mom, like myself, was very much haphazardly human. Like myself, she had a lot of issues and a lot of struggles, and she was not perfect. She had doubts at times, but agape love became nature to her, became second nature. It became, she didn't have to think about it. She didn't have to do, it was just, she had that. And if Tammy Faye, who people mocked and made fun of and did all those things, can do it, and has, still some people seen as a villain and things like that, or someone to mock, was able to do that within her short 63 years on this earth, I think we too can apply that to our own life. into our own works, and learn how to live within that. But I think you are going to realize, you might be thinking right now, well, Jay, I think it's a little ridiculous that you're comparing it to anarchy, this kind of, without rules or authority. But what you're going to find is that there's going to be rules and authority, and it might be the government, it might be your family, it might be tradition, it might be other denominations or other people of religious belief systems, or either people of different systems who want to practice an authority over you. And you're going to have to say, well, I give agape in the way where I don't have rules or authority. And even with my own emotions, I have to kind of jump over that and make the hurdle through that. That's when you're training in anything and you're working on a discipline, you have to do those things, is that I'm going to do that. And then we go back to the O in the anarchy, is that it's the order. And so I think the more we try to practice agape love, just like we've talked about grace before, and when we talk about grace, I still get pushback for that. But this is not just talking about it and seeing it work, but this is literally putting something into action that we will eventually is like, oh, this is why I said it was anarchy. Oh, I'm surprised that this is getting so much pushback here or there. You will be surprised in the places that you find where people don't like this or try to find reasons not to do it. I mean, there's whole theologies based on ways to find ways around it to not do it and to make people not deserve it. I mean, I heard a pastor the other day say that this Christian politician, hopefully will be crucified and repent and not become as inclusive, or that he would die. That pastor was the one who was not practicing. That pastor was the one whose theology found a loophole for not practicing agape, and that is a false gospel and a false message and not a good news at all, because they found a way to manipulate the very message that calls us to love each other to not really love each other, and to think that love was wanting to see others suffer, when it's constantly reminding us to not do that and not to help those when they are suffering. So, it's right there. It's very clear. And so now when I see it, it's almost like watching, it's like watching children play, and but they're like playing with matches or playing with broken glass. And you're just going like, oh, what are they doing? Like, how can they even claim to and these are people who are like, who have millions of thousands and maybe millions of followers. They're probably talking right now on something where there's probably 3,000 people watching them. We're talking about the principles of love and loving others, and there's 4 people with us right now. So you'll find that anarchy is also not a very popular concept when it's put in within love, that no system necessarily embraces you, as we've done it with grace for so many years. So I'm going to end with this because it said God is love. I drew this for you guys in the last minute. I guess maybe there is anarchy and order within God. So thanks for listening today, folks. I hope that at least hit you in that small way I was hit the other night when I was laying in bed, and it just dawned on me that, oh man, this is going to take me to a whole nother place. It was much easier to be graceful, but now this love and this constant action of trying to do this is going to be a real pain in the ass, and a whole new discipline to work around and to work with, and a new thing to work on, and a new thing to teach and talk about. So there you go, folks. That's what I got for you today in the midst of my slowly fading off. Again, Revolution is a 501c3. We exist because you believe in this work, and because you're a part of this work, and because you're willing to help support this work. We are a 501c3 and cannot do this work without you. It's financially almost impossible at times. But you can help Revolution by making a donation at revolutionchurch.com. We have PayPal and Venmo. And now it's really funny because now you can give to PayPal through Venmo, and you can give to Venmo through PayPal. If you guys knew how hard it was for us to get that Venmo account, people kept asking. I know barely anybody uses it. Like 3 people use it, and I'm grateful for it. But it's like how hard it was for us to get a nonprofit Venmo account. It took us over a year to do it. But yeah, so you can donate that way. It would be very helpful. It's one of the ways I make a living. It's also how this work continues. Um, and I'll be honest with you, if you had a better budget, I would not be exhausted right now talking to you, and I would have more time to study and work on this stuff and do this work. And so if you have a little extra, we'd much rather have you than your money. But if you do have enough and extra and you like what we're doing and you want to support it and you want to see more people do this and hear this type of message, please support this work. Also, please don't forget to like and subscribe. That helps us so much as well. It gets us out there in the algorithm. And so people just don't see all these guys who are trying to say that God wants people to die because they don't think the same way they do. You know, if you want to see grace and love get out there in a way that is so radical and so inclusive that we even have to practice anarchy with ourselves and our own emotions. And we want to overcome evil with good. Please support this work. Please like this work. Get your friends to like and subscribe. Say, hey, you don't have to watch it. Just subscribe. It helps these guys get into the algorithm and get the word out there. You know, we also put up clips of all the talks, small clips of all the talks here, and you can share those and do that here on our Instagram or on Facebook page. All that is, it also helps as well. But honestly, right now, we really do need your financial support. Yeah, so that's it. So if you can give, great. If you can't, that's okay too. We're going to be here next Sunday, and we'll see you then and see what we talk about. Hopefully, it's not Agape Part 3, and I figured out some other idea. Hey, don't forget, we're going to try to make these hats a reality. This is just the test one that they sent us to say, hey, we can make your hats for you. And hopefully we'll have those soon and figure out a way to kind of do a donation thing with this and a sticker and a few pins and buttons. And maybe that'll also help us raise some funds as well and keep this thing going and moving strong. You know, we're coming on 32 years, folks. This is really wild. Didn't think I'd be doing this long. And I'm grateful that I am. And so thank you all so much. Love you guys. Be kind to each other. And yeah, bye-bye.